You're already on the plane, seatbelt on, cabin lights dim, everything feels normal, until a flight attendant pauses near your row, looks at you for just a second longer than everyone else, and then walks away. That moment, it's not random, because long before takeoff, flight attendants have already started making decisions about you. How much attention you'll get, how closely you'll be watched, and in some cases, how quickly you'll be handled if something goes wrong. Most passengers never notice it. They think service is routine. But behind the calm smiles and polite tone, there's a system, a quiet way flight attendants read people, predict problems, and manage the entire cabin without saying a word. In the next 21 minutes, you'll see exactly how that system works, and once you do, you'll never step onto a plane the same way again. Before we start, quick question. What airline are you flying next? And have you ever felt like a flight attendant was watching you for a reason? Because what they notice in the first few seconds, most passengers completely miss. 1. They judge you before you even sit down. It doesn't start in the air. It starts the moment you step onto the aircraft. As you walk down the aisle, you think you're just finding your seat, adjusting your bag, maybe checking your boarding pass. But to a flight attendant, that short walk already reveals patterns. They're not judging you personally, but they are reading behavior quickly and quietly. Are you calm or rushing, aware or distracted, cooperative or already frustrated? These small details seem invisible to you, but to trained crew members, they stand out immediately. Aviation safety culture also emphasizes passenger awareness and compliance, something reinforced by authorities like the Federal Aviation Administration. In that brief moment before you even sit down, your behavior has already created an impression. Now imagine 2 passengers boarding. One moves smoothly, makes brief eye contact, and settles in without slowing anyone down. The other struggles with bags, blocks the aisle, and ignores simple instructions. Within seconds, the crew forms an expectation. And here's what most travelers miss. That first impression quietly shapes your entire flight. Who gets approached first, who gets quicker help, and who gets watched more closely. This isn't about favoritism, it's about efficiency. Flight attendants manage hundreds of people in a confined space, so they rely on early signals to predict issues. The passengers who appear calm and in control from the start tend to have smoother journeys, not by luck, but because they already signaled they're easy to manage. But here's what most people don't realize. That first impression doesn't just affect how you're treated. It can actually decide what happens to your bag before takeoff. 2. Your carry-on already tells them your trouble. Before any conversation happens, your luggage has already introduced you. The way your carry-on looks, how it sits on your shoulder, how easily you move with it, all of that sends a signal long before you reach your seat. A bag that's overstuffed, slightly unzipped, or bulging at the sides doesn't just look heavy, it suggests hesitation ahead. To the crew, that usually means slower movement, more time at the overhead bin, and a higher chance of disruption during boarding. In a process where timing is everything, even a few seconds of delay per passenger adds up quickly. That's why experienced crew members don't just see a bag, they see what that bag is likely to cause in the next few minutes. On the other hand, a controlled, compact carry-on tells a completely different story. It signals that the passenger knows how to move efficiently, place the bag quickly, and stay out of the way. And when boarding pressure builds, those signals matter. Flight attendants begin prioritizing flow over perfection, deciding quickly who might need intervention if space becomes limited. Here's the part most people never connect. When overhead bins start reaching capacity, decisions aren't always about strict rules, they're about reducing friction. The passenger who already looks like they might struggle becomes the easier choice to redirect. It's not personal, and it's not even about fairness. It's about keeping the process moving without delays spreading across the cabin. And once that first impression is set, something even simpler quietly shifts how you're treated. 3. The polite passenger. Advantage is very real. There's a difference between being friendly and being effortless to deal with, and flight attendants notice that distinction almost instantly. In a fast-moving environment where they're balancing safety checks, timing, and dozens of requests at once, they naturally gravitate toward passengers who reduce complexity, not add to it. A calm tone, clear words, and brief interactions create a smooth exchange that stands out more than forced friendliness ever could. It's not about impressing the crew or trying to be overly likable, it's about creating a moment that feels easy. And in a space where everything is compressed, ease becomes valuable very quickly. As the flight progresses, those early interactions quietly shape future ones. When multiple requests come in at once, the passengers who have already shown they're straightforward to handle tend to receive quicker, more relaxed responses, not because anyone is being favored, but because the human brain under pressure always looks for the simplest path forward. And when small decisions arise, like accommodating a seat adjustment or responding to a non-urgent request, the person who created less friction earlier naturally becomes the easier choice. These moments aren't announced, and they don't follow a visible system, but they happen constantly. And over the course of a flight, they can subtly shift your entire experience without you ever realizing why. Quick question. Have you ever noticed flight attendants being nicer to certain passengers for no clear reason? There's actually a pattern behind that. And the next one explains it in a way most people miss. 4. They secretly track how much you drink. At first glance, drink service feels routine. A cart rolls down the aisle, orders are taken, and everything seems relaxed. But while the exchange looks casual, something more deliberate is happening in the background. Flight attendants aren't just serving beverages, they're quietly observing patterns. Who orders alcohol early in the flight? Who asks again within a short time? Who starts showing small behavioral shifts like speaking louder, reacting slower, or losing awareness of space? None of this is tracked formally in front of you, but it is noticed. And at cruising altitude, where the environment already affects the body, these small changes matter more than most passengers realize. Alcohol behaves differently in the air due to lower cabin pressure and dehydration, which can intensify its effects faster than on the ground. That's why aviation authorities like the Federal Aviation Administration place responsibility on crew to prevent intoxication on board. Once a passenger crosses a certain threshold, even subtly, the response shifts immediately. Service doesn't taper gradually, it stops altogether. And here's what makes this important. That judgment is rarely reversed mid-flight. Even if you feel fine afterward, the crew is already working from a safety-first decision. The real advantage isn't knowing your limit, it's staying far enough below it that you never become part of their mental checklist in the first place. And sometimes it's not what you say or do, it's what you're wearing that changes everything. 5. The call button mistake that instantly changes your priority. Right above your seat, there's a small button that feels like a simple convenience. Press it, and a light signals your row. A chime sounds and a flight attendant responds. It's designed to make requests easier, especially when moving around the cabin isn't possible. But what seems like a basic feature actually plays a bigger role in how you're perceived during the flight, because every time that button is used, it enters a system of prioritization that the crew is constantly managing. Not all calls are equal, and how frequently one passenger uses it becomes part of an unspoken pattern. During a flight, attendants are balancing dozens of requests across multiple rows, often under tight timing constraints. When the call button is used repeatedly for minor needs, it subtly shifts how that passenger is handled. Not in an obvious or confrontational way, but in structure. Responses become shorter, more direct, less flexible. The interaction changes tone without being openly acknowledged. And here's where it matters most. When several requests happen at once, attention naturally flows toward those who use the system sparingly and appropriately. The others aren't ignored, but they're managed differently. No announcement explains this, and no rulebook states it clearly. Yet over time, it shapes how quickly and smoothly your needs are handled. If you travel even once a year, these small things are exactly what save you from stress at the airport. So make sure you're subscribed, because the next few are the ones most people completely ignore until it's too late. 6. Why they notice your shoes more than you think. It's not the kind of detail passengers expect to matter, yet footwear is something crew members quietly register almost immediately, not because of appearance, but because it signals readiness. During boarding, takeoff, and landing, flight attendants are mentally mapping the cabin in terms of safety, not comfort. Shoes become part of that assessment. Are they secure, easy to move in, and practical if quick action is required, or are they loose, restrictive, or already removed? These observations happen without any announcement, but they shape how the crew visualizes the cabin in a worst-case scenario. In aviation, preparation isn't reactive, it's anticipatory. If an evacuation were ever required, movement speed becomes critical. Surfaces may be hot, uneven, or covered with debris, and visibility may be limited. Passengers wearing unstable footwear or none at all are immediately at a disadvantage. From the crew's perspective, passengers who appear physically prepared are easier to rely on in high-pressure moments. It's not something they announce, but it influences trust. And in an environment where seconds matter, even small details like footwear quietly become part of a much larger safety equation. 7. The truth behind random seat changes. You're finally settled, seatbelt on, bag tucked away, mind starting to relax. Then a flight attendant approaches and asks you to move. No detailed explanation, just a polite request that feels unexpected. To most passengers, it seems random or even inconvenient, but inside airline operations, very little is random. Seat changes are often tied to factors that aren't visible from your seat, like maintaining balance across the aircraft or resolving small operational issues before they grow into delays. In some cases, it's about redistributing weight. In others, it's about quietly adjusting seating to prevent conflicts or improve cabin flow without drawing attention. Aircraft balance directly affects performance, especially during takeoff and landing, which is why airlines follow structured guidelines supported by bodies like the International Air Transport Association. When adjustments are needed, crew members act quickly and discreetly. And here's where subtle psychology plays a role. They don't approach just anyone. They select passengers who appear calm, cooperative, and unlikely to resist. Not because others aren't capable, but because speed matters. A smooth interaction keeps everything on schedule. So when you're asked to move, it isn't a coincidence. It's a calculated choice designed to solve a problem quietly before most people even realize there was one. But even when everything looks settled, decisions are still being made quietly around you. 8. Exit row isn't about size. It's about signals. Most passengers see exit row seats as a comfort upgrade. Extra space, more legroom, a better experience overall. But from the crew's perspective, that row serves a completely different purpose. It's not about comfort at all, it's about responsibility. In a real emergency, passengers seated there may need to act quickly, follow instructions without hesitation, and assist if required. That's why those seats aren't just assigned based on availability, they're evaluated. And that evaluation begins before you even realize it's happening. Crew members observe how attentive you are, how aware you seem, and whether you're engaged with what's happening around you. Consider two passengers sitting nearby. One is alert, listening during the safety briefing, aware of instructions. The other is distracted, focused elsewhere, barely acknowledging what's being said. Even if both meet the physical requirements, only one appears dependable under pressure. That's the difference. In practice, that willingness is often judged through behavior. If someone doesn't project readiness, they may be reassigned quietly. Not as a punishment, but as a precaution. Because in that row, perception matters as much as capability. Up to this point, everything you've seen is about how they observe you. But what happens next is about how they quietly control the entire cabin without you noticing. 9. The hygiene reality. They'll never announce. Most passengers assume the cabin they walk into is thoroughly cleaned and fully sanitized. It looks fresh, organized, and ready for a new flight. But behind that appearance is a much tighter reality. Aircraft operate on strict schedules, often with very limited time between arrivals and departures. Cleaning crews work quickly, focusing on visible areas, but they don't always have the time for deep sanitation of every surface. That means certain high-touch spots, like tray tables, armrests, and seat pockets, may not receive the level of cleaning passengers expect. It's not about neglect, it's about speed and operational pressure. Because of this, experienced travelers approach the cabin differently. They don't rely entirely on the environment being spotless. Instead, they manage their own contact points. A quick wipe of the tray table, avoiding unnecessary use of seat pockets, and being mindful of surfaces that are touched frequently throughout the day. Health organizations like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention also recommend maintaining personal hygiene during travel to reduce exposure risks. Once you understand how quickly planes are turned around, your perspective shifts. It's no longer about assuming cleanliness, it's about staying aware and making small adjustments that reduce unnecessary exposure without disrupting your travel experience. 10. They watch you during the safety demo for a reason. Most passengers treat the safety demonstration like something to get through, not something to notice. Screens stay on, conversations continue, and attention drifts elsewhere. But during those few minutes, the cabin crew isn't just performing a routine, they're observing the room in a very specific way. Not for discipline, but for awareness. They're identifying who is present in the moment and who is completely disengaged. A quick glance up, a small nod, even basic attention, these things stand out more than people realize. Because from the crew's perspective, that short window reveals how passengers are likely to respond if something unexpected happens later. Think of it less as a presentation and more as a silent assessment. In a high-pressure situation, instructions won't be repeated slowly or explained twice. The people who already showed awareness become easier to guide, while others may hesitate or look around for cues. That difference matters. You don't need to memorize every detail, but showing that you're mentally present sends a signal the crew picks up immediately. It tells them you're paying attention to your surroundings. And in an environment where quick reactions matter, that alone changes how you're perceived long before anything actually goes wrong. And this is exactly why something that feels completely harmless can suddenly turn into a serious situation without warning. 11. Why overhead bins fill up faster than you expect. It often feels like overhead space disappears too quickly. You board early, expecting plenty of room, and within minutes, bins start closing one after another. From the outside, it looks like poor planning or bad luck. But inside the process, something else is happening. Boarding isn't just about getting people seated, it's about keeping movement consistent from front to back. When passengers stop to adjust bags, reorganize items, or search for a better fit, the entire flow slows down. One delay turns into several, and suddenly the aisle becomes blocked. To prevent that, crew members start making faster decisions, sometimes closing bins before every inch is fully used. There was a situation on a nearly full flight where one passenger kept turning their suitcase in different directions, trying to make it fit perfectly. It took less than a minute, but that minute held up an entire section behind them. Within seconds, a flight attendant stepped in, closed the bin, and redirected the bag elsewhere, not because space was impossible, but because time was more valuable than precision. That's the part most people don't see. In that moment, it's no longer about maximizing storage, it's about maintaining momentum. And once that priority shifts, hesitation becomes the difference between keeping your bag on board or losing that option entirely. 12. Ignoring instructions has a hidden escalation path. A small instruction on a plane can feel easy to ignore. Adjust your seat, secure your tray, switch off a device. It doesn't seem urgent, especially when everything appears calm. But inside aviation, those instructions are connected to a larger system that depends on consistency. When one passenger delays or ignores them, it creates a break in that system. At first, the response is light, a reminder, delivered casually. If it continues, the tone changes slightly, becoming more direct. Not aggressive, just firmer. Each step isn't random, it follows a pattern designed to correct behavior before it turns into something bigger. Now consider a real scenario. A passenger keeps using their phone during taxi despite repeated reminders. At first it seems harmless, but as the aircraft prepares for takeoff, the crew's focus sharpens. What started as a minor delay now becomes a question of control. If one instruction isn't followed, what happens when something more critical is required? That's when the situation shifts. It's no longer about the device, it's about whether the passenger will comply when it truly matters. And if that doubt grows, the consequences escalate quickly, not because the rule is strict, but because safety depends on immediate cooperation, not negotiation. At this point, you might think everything is under control, but the last few things are what separate experienced travelers from everyone else. 13. Why they remember certain passengers. On a full flight, it's easy to assume you blend into the background. Rows are packed, interactions are brief, and everything feels routine. But from the crew's perspective, certain passengers stand out far more than they realize, not because of appearance, but because of patterns. Consistent behavior leaves an impression. Someone who remains calm during boarding, responds clearly, and doesn't create friction becomes easy to recognize. On the other hand, repeated complaints, small disruptions, or tense interactions also get noticed quickly. These signals don't require long conversations. They build through short moments that repeat over time. By the time the flight reaches cruising altitude, those patterns have already shaped a quiet mental map of the cabin. It's not written down, and it's not official, but it influences how interactions unfold. The passenger who has been steady from the start often experiences smoother communication, while the one who created tension may be handled more cautiously. A flight attendant once mentioned how, on a busy route, she could recall exactly which passengers might need extra attention before the meal service even began. Not because of memory alone, but because behavior tends to repeat. And once that pattern is recognized, it subtly shapes everything that follows without needing to be explained. 14. The one behavior that gets you better treatment. It's easy to assume that being friendly is the key to a better experience on a flight. Smiling more, talking more, trying to build rapport. But in reality, the behavior that stands out most is far simpler and far more effective. Clarity. In a fast-moving environment where crew members are handling multiple tasks at once, clear communication becomes incredibly valuable. A short request, delivered calmly and directly, removes guesswork. It allows the interaction to move forward without delay or confusion. And in a space where timing matters, that difference becomes noticeable very quickly. Now compare two situations. One passenger makes a request in a single clear sentence and waits. Another adds extra context, changes direction mid-sentence, or repeats details unnecessarily. Both are polite, but one creates a smoother interaction. Over time, those smoother interactions add up. When multiple requests happen at once, attention naturally flows toward the ones that are easiest to resolve. It's not about preference, it's about efficiency. The passengers who receive quicker, more relaxed responses aren't doing anything unusual. They're simply making communication easier to process. And in a high-pressure environment, easier almost always becomes the priority. 15. The biggest secret. They know what's going to happen before it happens. After enough flights, patterns stop feeling random. They start becoming predictable. Flight attendants don't just respond to situations as they happen, They recognize early signals that most passengers overlook. A shift in tone between two people, someone becoming restless in their seat, a conversation that gradually gets louder. These aren't isolated moments, they're indicators of what might come next. With experience, crew members begin to connect those signals quickly, allowing them to move before a situation fully develops. What looks like coincidence is often timing built on repetition. There was a situation on a late evening flight where a small disagreement started quietly between two passengers. Before voices even raised, a flight attendant repositioned herself nearby, not interrupting, just present. Within minutes, the tone softened and the situation faded. No announcement, no escalation, just awareness applied at the right moment. That's the difference. Passengers experience events as they unfold, while crew members anticipate them based on what they've seen before. And that anticipation is what keeps the cabin stable. It's not about reacting faster, it's about recognizing patterns early enough that reaction is barely needed at all. Click any of these videos on your screen and I'll you in a moment.